So why am I here? For the last 25 years, I've been involved in an organization called HeartMath. How many of you have heard of HeartMath? Whoa, quite a few. Wow, fantastic. Well, you should. You're into love, and so are we. And I was one of the founders and had a very prominent role in the organization, and as Samantha mentioned, 11 years as CEO. My life took a rather dramatic change of course in late 2009 when I was diagnosed with stage 1 bladder cancer. And surgery and treatments followed. And treatments leading to staph infections. The staph got in my blood. Those of you who are healthcare oriented know that's a bad thing. That's life-threatening. So now I was dealing with a life-threatening condition as a side effect of the treatment for the cancer, which was the other kind of big deal I had to deal with. It all got taken care of, actually, obviously. I'm more than 5 years cancer-free now. Thank you very much. But along the way, the hips that had danced a lot and run on a lot of roads were giving out. And by 2011, I realized I had to have both hips replaced. So I've had both hips replaced. And don't pity me, however, because I'm like, I'm cool on all kinds of levels. And so are you, dude, by the way. Seriously cool. So my life changed course in a rather dramatic way. And how did I get through all that? And by the way, my mother passed away during that time period. And by the way, I decided I couldn't stay CEO of an organization that I loved and helped to create because some part of me needed to express itself again in a more creative way. And my marriage dissolved. Other than that, and I had shingles, but the shingles was really mild. And then last year I got salmonella while I was in South Africa, just so I could experience yet another dangerous sounding thing. So those of you wondering, did you actually pull out a list of the top 10 stressors and decide to just, like that's your bucket list now for some reason? No, I hadn't done that consciously, but it happened. And through all that process, and for the last 25 years of my life really, I've tried to prove in myself that love is the most important thing you can do. And that is how I got through it. And I knew it would have many stories as part of that journey, and I'd never dreamed I would be at a place called the Love Summit to be able to tell about it. But it has happened in that way. And so for the next half an hour or so, we're going to share with you some left brain stuff and some right brain stuff. It's got a title that sounds a bit pompous, maybe, The New Science of Performance and Excellence. I think I may have come up with that, which is probably why it's pompous. But why the heart matters in business. So this is going to be left brain and right brain. I'm going to share some data and some science because this cool organization that I helped to start called HeartMath, it's known partly because we've been able to prove that love does matter biologically, organizationally, in all kinds of ways. Love isn't just a soft, nice concept. If NFL coaches can say it matters, why wouldn't business owners be able to say it matters? That has always been so weird to me, these testosterone-driven guys talking about, my guys played with so much heart and I love my guys. Meanwhile, they're all 350 pounds and like never seen a day without massive amounts of testosterone. If it's okay for them to say love matters and the heart matters, why are we scared in business, right? Well, luckily we're not so scared anymore. And again, thank you for opening this space for us to do this. At the end of the day, whether you ever go through a series of events like I had to go through, a few years before that, one of my close brothers, blood brother, died of ALS after a 4-year horrific demise with that. I've had a lot of tragedy. My parents both died of Alzheimer's. And yet, standing here looking at me, I don't look like I'm suffering, do I? Because love has been what's gotten me through the entire way. Love in my work, love in my relationships, love every moment I possibly can, love in all of you. To me, when we talk about a love summit and love in business, part of it is about compassion. Because the day that my brother was diagnosed with ALS, I was walking around in a daze. I mean, this was a healthy, athletic, vital guy in his 40s who would die 4 years later. My coworkers had no idea why Bruce was in a daze. They could have judged me for, wow, he's super spaced out today. What's up with him? They had no idea what the news that I just heard. So compassion is so vital, so important in our work lives, let alone our personal lives. At the end of the day, it is about standing in other people's shoes, isn't it? And if we're going to create businesses based on love, we've got to be able to understand at least something of what other people go through, right? It's not just about ourselves, and it's certainly not just about profit. That's obvious, right? So how does love become real and practical, and what's the science behind it? That's kind of where we're going to go next with this, because luckily, science is caught up. And it's not just poets and romantics and philosophers who understand love matters. Scientifically, we now get how much love matters, and that's what I'm going to take you through now for a little bit. And it turns out, through studies on love and compassion, by the way, that photo is like the coolest Facebook photo ever. That's not Photoshop. That's out on the Mongolian plains somewhere, some incredibly joyous little kid with her pet camel. So, but look at the list of benefits of positive emotion, benefits of the heart, of love, for our brain. So part of what this presentation is going to be about is that if we want to perform better in our organizations, have more productive people working in our organizations, love matters because it helps the brain. It's the fuel the brain needs to perform at its best. Samantha mentioned that I started a project called What Makes Your Heart Sing. So after going through cancer and all that stuff that I described, I realized I had something still to express with my voice. Those of you who know musical theater, I had the lead role in a show called The Fantastics for 2 years in New York. I did over 700 performances. That contains the song called Try to Remember the Kind of September. That's all you're getting. But that song is from that show. It was a marvelous, fantastic, and delightful and very uplifting show to be in, night after night after night after frickin' night after night after frickin' night after night after night. Positive emotions keep our energy up in all kinds of ways that matter to the brain. On the other hand, the average person, as Thoreau said recently, oh no, that was 150 years ago, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, leading to chronic illness, which is now very clearly, it's a mountain of evidence. It's not just California-based research companies coming up with this stuff. So we know this. So a little tour through the brain. This is my brain this morning, actually. I was able to get this photo. It was not easy getting in there with the little optical camera through my ear. I actually go through the ear canal right into the neuronal structure. But it was all lit up because I was excited about today. But this is an artist rendering of what neurons look like. And of course, neurons are the transmitters of information to our brain, to our body, etc. So neurons are important guys. We also now know from all the brain research around neuroplasticity and just how adaptable our brains really are and how they don't lose brain cells like we used to think, that we can continue to grow them even when you're old like me. It keeps developing, it keeps being plastic, and connectivity matters. How connected our brain is with itself has to do with our ability to learn and have greater resilience, etc. So the connectivity really matters. And we also know that meditation, whether it's heart-based meditation, which is my personal favorite because it engages your heart, not just mental processes, especially heart-based meditation enhances the connectivity of our brain, which in turn is the infrastructure of how you learn, how you perform, and everything else. Look at that graphic, by the way. Isn't that one of the coolest graphics ever? Your love filling all the little circuitry in your brain. And that's literally what's happening when you love, whether you're loving an employee, whether you're loving a customer, whether, as David is saying, you're taking the honor to love yourself. All of those moments being the fuel that your brain really needs to do what it is designed to do. And this next set of graphics is actually not a rendering, it's an actual photomicrograph. So we know now that neurons, as we're having thoughts, they start to link together to create circuits, right? So whether it's thoughts or whether we're learning something like a child learning how to stand up and hold its own and stand there, a circuit had to be built that allowed those muscular functions to happen. Just like circuits had to be built so we could talk language, just like circuits had to be built to do that with our arm and to do that with our legs or anything else that's happening. Circuits are all being built, right? As they do when we're addicted to certain behaviors or habits. Circuits are being built. And it turns out that when a neural circuit is created, the lower right-hand picture is looking at the wrapping. My laser pointer's not being a laser today. The wrapping is called myelin. It's sheaths that surround the circuit to protect that circuit so it's strong. It can be up to 50 layers deep of this myelin protector. It's like a coating around the wire, if you will, to protect it and make it strong, which is why bad habits are so frickin' hard to break. Because biologically, they have been wound and wound and wound and covered with this myelin sheath so that we have that habit. It's a good thing when I realized I could actually dance again with 2 titanium hips. I still had the circuits. They hadn't been used in a long time. But god damn, I can do that stuff again. Whoa! The circuits were there. It also means to unlearn anything, we have to enable that myelin to unwrap. For habits to let go. They don't just go away. We don't just say, oh, I'm not going to do that habit anymore. There's still a circuit that's built unless we can unwrap it. Guess what fuel is one of the best ways to feed the unwrapping of that circuit? What fuel? Love. Mr. Barry White. I like to channel Mr. Barry White right now. So now let's talk about the direct connection between the heart and the brain. So the brain's pretty cool, right? And it's a challenge in a short presentation to do justice to anything like the topic of the brain. Now I'm going to add insult to injury and try to describe the connection of the heart to the brain, which is even more complex. It turns out your high school knowledge of what the heart was being a pump, that's really outdated. It turns out the heart's this incredibly intelligent system with neural processing. There's a neural network in the heart itself, so complex it's considered a brain. We have a brain in our heart. How many people knew that? A very enlightened group. Okay, I'm impressed. Bow down to all of you, smart people. But the relevance here is that the brain and the heart are in fact talking to each other all the time, 24/7. Awake, asleep, meditating, whatever we're doing. Constant communication. We used to think it was smart brain, dumb body. Now it's more like smart body, aggregator, network, information being shared all over the place. So how do you make that information sharing as coherent as possible? That's why meditation is so important, why mindfulness, why taking care of our body is so important, so we can integrate all these parts of ourselves into a holistic wholeness. Love is the fuel. Love is the best fuel. Love is never wasted. If you hear nothing else from what I shared today, love is never wasted. However you use love in your work, with someone, on yourself, it is never wasted. Even if the other person that you were really hoping will change as a result of your love, even if that doesn't happen, the love you expend is still never wasted, in my opinion. So where the story of the heart got really interesting and the discovery of HeartMath came into play in the early 90s was when we got onto this research called heart rate variability. The essence of which is that the human heart is constantly changing speed no matter what's going on in our life. Asleep, awake, exercising, anything, meditating, it's always changing speed. Always. Biologically, if it didn't, let's say you hadn't exercised for 6 months, so you'd never kind of gotten it up and gotten it down. If it was always staying the same, and suddenly we smelled smoke and we had to race out of the building, and your heart hadn't changed speed for the last 6 months, what would happen? Heart attack. Yeah, a pulled muscle in the body is one thing. A pulled heart is a heart attack. So the muscle has to be exercised, and nature has designed it, God has designed it for it to vary all the time, up and down. How it looks, literally, is something like this. So what you're looking at in the top graphic is the heart rhythm pattern of a negative emotion such as frustration. I use the term negative loosely, it's not a bad thing, but stressful emotion. The graphic on the bottom says appreciation. You could substitute love, compassion. Notice how smooth and regular it is. By the way, it's not a flat line. That intuitively sounds bad, and in this case, it is bad. You want it nice and smooth and varying, beautifully varying. You don't want it chaotic like the top graph. The top is like fear. You know what it feels like when you have fear, right? It's like chaos inside you. On the other hand, when you feel love, when you feel appreciation, when you feel compassion, there's a smoothness inside, right? Does that make sense? Isn't that what you feel? We're going to make this come to life now. So one of the things that HeartMath innovated was a way of tracking, be able to measure in real time the reality of this picture. So it's not just a concept. So one of you is about to be the volunteer in a little experiment. I'm not going to pick you. When somebody's going to raise their hand and say, you want to do this. And what it is I'm going to hook a little electrode, little clip to your ear. It'll be very little pain at first, really, at the beginning. Pretty much imperceptible pain. Now, as it goes, that's a whole other story. And then of course, as I turn the intensity up, it'll be kind of a mind-shattering sort of a pain off, Anybody believing this part? Would you like to be the volunteer? Okay. What is your name?
My name is Miriam.
Miriam. Wow, fantastic. So what we've done here, we've got this technology called M-Wave, which has got this little clip, which is an infrared reader, and I'm going to clip it on Miriam's ear. And luckily, her heart and her ear are connected, as are all of your hearts and your ears. And so what's going to happen here is I'm going to start the software. So this is Miriam's heart rhythm pattern live on our stage, which basically means that the speed of her heart is varying between a low of about 62 right here, up to a high of about 76, 77. So maybe a little counterintuitive. She's sitting still. She's not animated. She's not exercising. And yet there's a lot of variation, as I had told you. So, in fact, I was telling the truth earlier. And basically, all human beings have variation with the exception of heart transplant patients whose new heart is not wired to their old brain. They get the new heart without all the wiring because all the wiring cannot come over in the transplant. So theirs is flat, but not Miriam's and not all of us. So hers is varying. So what I'm going to ask you to think about, Miriam, is anything that has... So you've traveled all the way from Moscow for this conference.
Yep.
Are you questioning that decision at any point?
Questioning the decision? Yes. No.
I'm joking. I'm joking. So what I'd like you to think about is any time that you've experienced lately in the past month, let's say, that was highly stressful. And just kind of think about it, but relive it a little bit. You don't have to talk about it, but just kind of remember when you felt embarrassed or when you felt really angry or stressed out for any reason. Just kind of go back into the experience. You can see just as soon as I asked the question, there was a little bit of a peak. And it's peaking up higher than it had been as well, whereas it was kind of down a lot lower right there. And I'm drawing attention to it a little bit, so it's staying up a little bit, right? You're thinking about it a little bit?
No.
No? You're just embarrassed because I'm asking you questions. Right. So, and of course, now it's spiked up a little bit because I drew attention to the potential embarrassment that she might be experiencing. And so if I continued in this path, we'd see more spikes and it would jump higher and higher and higher. So this was me kind of playing around with her. This is me trying to get her stressed out. And you see it more consistently spiking up, right? A little bit, as we would have expected. What the software is also showing is that she was reaching into what's called the zone of high performance, the green. So she got into a very, as in our language, coherent pattern, meaning her system was operating in a very balanced, synchronized way. There's a lot of science behind the autonomic nervous system and the brain and how all that falls into place. One of the things I want to say, so in addition to her traveling all the way from Moscow to then have the courage to stand up in front of 200 total strangers and expose her heart, I mean, that deserves at least a round of applause for... So, thank you. I'm going to take this one. So you just saw a graphic demonstration of the ability to regulate one's own heart. You can imagine that as you practice something like that, and when you don't have 250 people watching you, it gets easier and easier because you're building the circuitry. You're building the internal state that says, I can be in control of myself instead of being just a victim, instead of just someone reacting to life. Well, it turns out the electrical output of the heart is the strongest signal in your body by far, 60 times stronger than what the brain's electrically putting out. In fact, whenever a neuroscientist tries to measure brain waves, the software has to filter out the EKG, the heart signal, because it overwhelms the measurement of the brain waves unless they filter it out. The power of the heart is that strong electrically, 60 times stronger than the brain waves. It turns out, just like any electrical signal, it does not stop at the skin. And electrical signals create fields. As you know, every time you drive under a radio tower and you've got your car radio on, you hear static, right? Because you're driving through the field of those lines, not just under them. There's a field there. Well, every human being, every living thing creates an electrical field. This is not an aura. We're not getting all woo-woo on you right now. Oh, he's the California guy. He would get into this like really... This is electrical, this is measurable, and it turns out that the shape of the wave created by the field, created by the heart, looks something like this, several feet away from our body. Have you ever been close to someone physically close to someone who was really angry and you felt the anger because there was some kind of emanation who's had that experience. Or the opposite, you're really close to somebody who's in a beautiful, loving, appreciative, accommodating space, and you feel that too. Oh, it's so nice to be around you, right? Physiologically, there is something going on, and it is going through space. It's not stopping at the skin. We feel it all the time. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt, whoa, something just went on in here? Maybe it was anger, maybe it was not so angry at all. So it turns out, guess what? If we've got an electrical field, then we are interacting with each other's electrical fields all the time. Like it or not, know it or not, believe it or not, it's happening. When I was first becoming a manager, I was sort of sensitive to this, but when I saw this research, I thought, oh, I got to get my act together. As a manager, I got to get my act together. Because I have power, by dint of my position, I have power over the people that are supporting or subordinate to me, if I want to use that language. So not only can I fire them, not only can I give them commands, if I want to be in that mode, but electrically, I'm affecting them with my mood, whether I'm saying anything or not. We've all had that experience, right? You can feel somebody, like something's going on they're not telling you, but you can feel it nonetheless. So HeartMath has basically come along and said, yep, and it's measurable. This is all real stuff. So the left-brainers love this, and I have enough left brain I can appreciate it. So love is a really good investment of energy to expend. It's not going to guarantee perfect relationships, but it's at least setting a foundation where you're giving it a good shot. Love is never wasted. Even if it has no effect on the other person in a dynamic like this, it's still better for your system than the opposite. 20 years ago, there was this wild research study that came out saying that a simple, stressful reaction that happens every day, you see the name of somebody in your email inbox, just their name, and you have a stress reaction. Does that happen? 1,400 biochemical reactions later, 1,400 have happened in that moment when you saw the name. Imagine when it's worse than just the name and it's an actual argument. So we're biochemically changing all the time. So guess what? Meditation, heartful practices, putting love out to the world and to yourself makes a measurable difference in how your brain's responding. Mountains of evidence. It turns out this matters, right? It turns out that the more you put love out, the more you try to come from appreciation or gratitude or compassion instead of the easy route, which is the anger, the frustration, the insecurity. But when you make that effort, biologically you are changing too. And we've been able to study thousands of people through the work of HeartMath. And in this one particular study looking at almost 6,000 people, turned out there's about a 52% reduction in the percentage of people feeling exhausted because they were loving more. Love helps us tap into another source of energy that's not there without it. Well, think of that in terms of organizational culture. Think of that when we're burning the candle at both ends and realize love helps us reboost the system, recharge the batteries. Aches and pains, a similar thing. A lot of the aches and pains we experience are related to stress, right, and tension. It's not literally that we've hurt our back. It's that there's something unresolved that's collecting itself where we're vulnerable that might be our back. You put more love out, you put more appreciation out, you're more sensitive, you're more compassionate. That changes us biochemically in a whole host of ways. So it's a really good investment. Love is never wasted. The bottom line for me is more love equals more productivity and more performance. From the pure business side of this, everywhere I have worked in the last 20 years, every client I've worked with, my first priority is always how much can I love them and love myself in the process? How well can I stay balanced in this engagement, knowing it's clients, knowing shit happens, knowing that unexpected stuff will occur as I have seen in my own life history. And in fact, you go through shit like that, and then you get irritated over an email, and your higher self tells you, dude, you're seriously upsetting about this email compared to what you've already fucking been through. Like, this is a joke. You think you can't handle this email? Seriously? That is how my higher self talks to me, by the way. He calls me dude in a bit of a condescending tone. Dude. Okay, so I'm pretty much done. Well, sort of. Go ahead, Anders.
I just wanted to make a few closing remarks and use a few of these slides to show them. For me, I went to China and Tibet in 2000. I took a break from my business life. I came back. and I co-founded an organization called Spirit in Business in 2000. We did this kind of work back all that long time ago, and our first conference had 600 executives from around the world, and I'm sure that Darcy was not very far from this work, and some of you might have been there. And here we are 15 years later, and there were a few takeaways from that and from this work. That's where Bruce and I reconnected, and this slide so well puts it together. We started to all of a sudden realize that these great wisdom traditions, whether you have come from Ecuador, you're a shaman, you're a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Christian, a Jew, they all spoke to the power of love, and then finally, scientifically, we could see those pictures. And we need visceral proof. You know, one of the reasons I've always respected the Dalai Lama is that he has said back to people that practice faith, his wisdom, is that when science ever can prove what we believe is wrong, then we change. Now, I don't know if that's right brain or left brain, but it's pretty intense for a spiritual leader. And these pictures that are now coming forth make a big difference. One of the takeaways, and the top takeaway that I took away in 2002 when we walked away from this conference sponsored by American Express and Verizon and Forbes, and then many smaller, really cool social entrepreneur businesses from around the world, was that it was really great that we had all these spiritual leaders. It was really wonderful the Dalai Lama was our patron, and it was really good we had those pictures, because I was working with business people and they run on science. Now, if we can give them science in their left side of their brain, then maybe they relax into their right side of the brain. But 15 years ago, I couldn't have put on the Love Summit. Then we go to this thing about habits. And, you know, this is a practice. What Bruce just took you through is a scientific process and a habit. But we make these habits and we unmake these habits. We make a lot more of, depending on who you are, the likelihood is that we make as many bad habits as we make good habits. And it's not surprising that in most productive programs where we want to self-improve, we want to become wiser, that they have to have duration. The weekend retreat gets you almost nothing, other than maybe being inspired to start a practice that over time you can unwrap all those habits and create new ones. So whatever those habits are, whether they're meditation habits, they're Tai Chi, they're walking in the woods, they're breathing deeply, they're reading love poems to your husband or wife or partner, hanging out with your dog, taking care of yourself, whatever those habits are that build that peace and love and compassion and generosity, those habits, practice makes perfect. You know, your mother told you that, your dad told you that, and every Olympian has been told that, right? Nike, just do it. So I'll close with the love, fear, and why I ended up in private wealth management and working with money. Because in the end, every day when you go see your advisor, or you're not your advisor, or you look at your mutual fund, you have a debate with yourself. Am I in love and I have the opportunity to use that money to transform my life and the world around me? Or am I in fear and greed? And do I think that if I can only compound that, regardless what the results are, that my life will be different? And so these choices, these and choices, these or choices, the yin and the yang of love and fear and compassion and love, they're with us each day. They're a habit, they're a practice, they're a choice. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Bruce.